Welcome to this week's episode of Mind Over MS. This week, we're going to stick with sleep. Now, there's a lot of things I could cover in this, and there's a lot of other things I'm excited to talk to you about. The reason I'm going to stick with sleep for this one is, first of all, again, almost everything we're going to talk about today is free and things that you can easily do at home. And they're also accessible to the widest amount of people. So regardless of where you are in your health journey, whether your MS is mild, under control right now, where you are in a relapse or out of one, or whether you're quite sick, these are all things that you should be able to implement safely and easily at home. So we're going to stick here again today because I think we're going to benefit the most people with easiest, simple solutions. And a lot of times in life, it is the simple things. They seem almost too easy to be effective, but they're always really eloquent. And so we're going to stick with that again for this week. So I think that there's like a lot of things I could mention about sleep and some things like I think that we all know already, things like the blue light affecting our ability to go back to sleep, because really at the end of the day, we're supposed to be looking more at red lights. This is because of the sunrise and the sunset. Another day, I'm actually going to talk to you about the benefit of sun gazing and what the light does to our eyes. So for this episode, it's enough to just say that I think we do know that they do sell blue light glasses. So if you're one of these people that feels the need to fall asleep to your TV, which if you're having sleep issues, MS or not, that's not really something that would be beneficial for you. It is always better to do something to wind down, something generally starting 2 hours before the recommended bedtime of 10 o'clock. So something around 8 o'clock, you would want to just have a bath or read a book, something that just kind of calms your mind and settles you, which TV, I'm not saying there isn't, pleasant movies out there, but for the most part, we're watching news, which is generally pessimistic view of the world. It's a lot of violent stories. Or we're watching TV, which when you flip through TV, you're either getting, I don't have cable. I haven't had cable for like 15 years. But every time I'm ever at someone's house where cable is on, the types of TV shows that people are interested in watching, I can't understand, with hosts that are screaming and yelling at people and people caught having, episodes, or people recovering from drugs or that have these weird addictions. It's always kind of not really great stimulus to be putting into your brain, especially right before bed. But I know that for a lot of people, you're going to look at your phone still. And I don't even sleep with my phone in the room because I do believe that I'm EMF sensitive as well. So it's a good idea to not have, even if it's on airplane mode and you have to have it that way in case you need an alarm or something else in your room. But it's really not good to actually be radiating yourself all night. And, I'm sure most of us are aware by now that the phone, like, even when I put my phone downstairs 2 floors away from me, as soon as I'm up and walking, my phone starts dinging downstairs. So whatever kind of technology they have in the phone now that is already kind of like tracking me, I feel like there should be sometimes, at least in your evening when you're winding down, and sometimes first thing in the morning, where you set your own habits and your own mind frame instead of whatever fear, propaganda, whatever swaying of a story, regardless of what side of the political aisle you're on. They really do infiltrate us with a lot of negative information and really kind of turn people against each other. I would say, as my advice, don't watch that before bed, especially if you want to have a good night's sleep. Another thing being said, this one might be an easy one for people. Again, for everybody. So it doesn't have to be people with MS. So if you're somebody that loves somebody or sleeps with somebody in the bed with MS, or you just have any other kind of health issue, or you just want general well-being, it really is a good thing to have a blackout. So a lot of people don't have blackout curtains in your room. And anyone who's struggling with MS, this might be a difficult thing for you to do because I know for myself, especially like in my relapse, that was pretty major. When I would get out of bed, I was very wobbly and I couldn't see in the dark, and I didn't have any pre-parietal perception, which for anyone who has MS and knows what that is or doesn't have MS, it's your ability to feel your own body in space. So it is something that's one of the reasons why I like yoga for people with MS, is because it helps to bring that awareness back. But if you're struggling, you don't have it at the moment, and it's dark at nighttime in your room because you've blacked it out and you have lights out, it can be difficult, because another thing that people with MS will struggle with is frequent urination at nighttime due to chronic urinary tract infections, which is frequently the case, especially for those that are taking immune suppressing therapies. So you don't really want to be getting up and it's blacked out in your room and you're now in the dark stumbling, you trip on something, it's a fall hazard. I know that myself, when I was getting up, I liked to be able to touch the wall at least, and kind of feel my way so that I had some kind of level of support in case somebody, the dog or something, is on the floor and perhaps you trip. The last thing you want to do is put yourself back by an injury. So I think that it's a good idea to put a little light on in your room, or at least in your hallway, light up the bathroom, whatever you need so that you can get up safely. With that being said, you still want to have this darker sleep. So just go online and get yourself a pair of why can't I even think of the name for it, but just like eye covers to wear. I think a good one is they have weighted ones. And for anyone who's ever slept with a weighted blanket, a weighted eye shade is really nice as well too, because the pressure of it on your face, and I think they even sell some that are like temperature regulated. So anyone who's maybe having hot flashes, or is just somebody that's generally hot, or people with MS are very heat sensitive. So even if you're just sleeping somewhere you don't have air conditioning, it's hot at nighttime, a cooling one, and one that's weighted, is going to give you so many other benefits as well to really improve the quality of your sleep. Now, I don't recommend or suggest any kind of sleep aid I'm sure there's herbal things and there's other kinds of things you can do that work and are safe and are beneficial. And so, I'm not going to recommend any of that here because I want you to seek the advice of somebody that's more knowledgeable about that. And definitely if you're going to take anything like doctor prescribed, I guess you're listening to them. But I don't think long-term these are things, at least in my opinion, that are really going to help treat the condition, which is really, this is what we're going to talk about today, following nature's laws that govern our internal clocks. So we all have a rhythm in our body and we can't escape that. Our body has its own clocks. In fact, each cell has its own clock that is set to different rhythms throughout the day that cycle with the moon and with astrology and these things. At some level, maybe they're esoteric and maybe people don't really fully ascribe to them. But I think at a base level, we all agree that there's something like a circadian rhythm. So to have a circadian rhythm, we know that we need to have sleep cycles that are kind of matching the rising and falling of the suns, and that we need to get a certain amount of sleep at night. And when we do this, the pineal gland and the pituitary gland are going to release the right kind of hormones, melatonin, serotonin, things that are not only going to promote better quality sleep, but it's also going to set the hormones up for the rest of your next day. So it is important to do that. But I think what I want to talk about beyond that too are a lot of things that people don't know. And it's because it's things your doctor's not trained in. It's not really common knowledge. It's not things that people really talk about frequently, but I hope that you will learn them today. And I can only give a brief overview of a lot of these things. And to be honest, there's still so much more for me to learn too, because this is something I feel like you could study for an entire lifetime and still only be at the tip of it, because the years and years of history that's gone into this. And so just to get to the point, then what we're going to talk about today then is yoga again. So yoga in this case is going to be another branch of the Vedic text. So anyone that's ever heard of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is the life science. So Ara meaning life and Veda meaning knowledge or science of. So in this case, it's going to be looking at what do the sages of the past believe to be true then, and to be honest, it's still science is proving it all true now again. So the more science comes out, the more it solidifies my belief that actually science is going to prove God. Because back in the day when people were looking at these things, and unless you believe that we had rises and falls in civilization, which is kind of matched maybe by Egyptians and the Aztecs and other places where they built on these sacred kind of geological sites, and maybe that we at some point we had more advanced civilization that knew these things. We kind of had dumbing down or something happening in society. And maybe we're just at the point where we're tipping back up and building the knowledge again. But all of these old texts, they're finding out now that we have scientific measures and tools to look at it. They are all actually proven correct. So we're not just going to talk about Ayurveda, which is the one that actually is studying more of the natural laws, physics, how your body fits into it, biochemistry, cycles of sleep, and these things. But we're going to talk about VASTU today as well. And this is going to be more about building science. So this is when they're looking at like how did they lay out the direction of their cities and their buildings and their sleep, and what was the best and proper way to do that. So we're going to look at both of these kinds of things today. And it's, again, at a really basic level, just because we can't cover all of it too much, but it's something I just wanted to spark a curiosity or an interest in people. And maybe you try it out yourself, and maybe you'll catch a bug for it, and you're going to just delve deep into the thick of it and learn more and more, because all of the basic things I've ever implemented in my life have absolutely shown dramatic effects, and it also was replicated with other people I suggested it to. So let's look at the first one then, which is the cycles just of your day. So I don't know where we're going to start with this one. Okay, so in yoga, they have 3 doshas. So doshas are sort of considered like your attributes or your characteristics. They're not one of them isn't better than the other. They're just all like, lateral to each other. There's not a hierarchy. One's not better than the other. We all have a different predominance of one or more of them. So they can be thought of. So we have the kapha. And that one is thought of as earth and water. So it's a little bit heavier. It's a little bit slower and tuned down a little bit, slower digestion. It's more grounded. It takes its time. And then you move into pitta. And pitta is now fire and water. Which is where you're going to get all of your productivity from. So this is where we're going to get the most action and forward moving towards our goals. And people you would think of here as like the A-type or the doers. And then you move into vata, and vata is the elements of air and space or ether. So these people are very creative. They're very fast moving. They're a little bit maybe flighty, and they're very creative. They're always on the move and thinking ideas, and they're in motion all the time. This one has a tendency to get unbalanced, I think, a little bit easier than the other ones, just because if you think about elements in general, it's much harder to move earth. And fire kind of consumes the other things, but air and space are very easily shifted, and they're not as contained, right? They're a little bit more expansive, and so they can kind of shift more. But they're required to, and so all of us will have these qualities within us. Like I said, some might be more dominant. Some of those things you might just sort of resonate with more. A lot of people have 2 that are dominant. Some might even have like a pretty even mix of all of them. And then I would say that there's also times and areas of your life where one thing might be more outweighing of the other things. It doesn't always, like, although you have base ones, I think you're kind of born with a certain constitution and personality. A lot of things we can change with our thoughts and our behavior and consciousness, and different circumstances and decisions that we make over our life will shift this. Now, this also happens like on the daily level. So we're going to just go review this sort of about how this should affect your sleep if you're trying to heal. Because the idea here is that if we follow nature's laws, and our body lives in nature. So as much as we try to separate ourselves from the natural world, we cannot escape that our biology, even if our consciousness is different than that of other things that we cohabit with on earth, the consciousness is still the prana, the thing that gives us our breath and animates our bodies. It condenses into a material world, and we are governed by the laws of physics within that. And whether you believe that is a pure science fact, or whether you believe that God created the universe and that he made and structured all these things, it really doesn't matter. Either way, you have to live within those bounds. And when we become unbalanced and when we stop living within those truths, this is when we can have disharmony, dis-ease, right? We get outside of the balance of things. And it's almost like the more you become unbalanced, the more the veil thickens on you. So you make different choices that further remove you from it. So you might eat worse or intoxicate yourself, or like watching this bad media late at night, or whatever these things are. It kind of can sometimes, once you get off balance, it's hard to even see what you would need to do to get in balance. And that's why with this podcast, I really want to review some of the basics again, because we need to go back and really think sometimes about not these big complicated things that are going to cost a lot of money and that, we have to invest a lot of time and research and things into. But think about just what are the things that we all should have already known and should have already been doing that we've just forgotten. And let's just go back to the basics and do those things and see how much better we can start building up from the foundation again. And maybe by the time we get up to a certain level, all these extra frills and these things and the supplements and all of these other treatments, medications, maybe they're not even that necessary. So let's start there. So like I said, these 3 doshas are going to cycle throughout the day 3 times, 4 hours each, making 2 cycles of 12 hours, which we understand as also this kind of circadian rhythm that we're trying to live on. So yoga tells us that we should be waking up before 6 a.m. And this is because all the cycles start with kapha. And like I mentioned before, kapha is the sort of grounded, heavier, steady, slow thinking, slow to make decisions, slow inertia. That is going to be predominant in our body between 6 and 10. And that's both in the AM and in the PM. So in this case, when we wake up in the morning, we want to be doing it before we're going to hit that period. Because once we hit kapha, it's going to feel harder to wake up. And when we do wake up, we're going to feel like for the whole day, like overslept or underslept or tired. We're going to feel sluggish. Those are the days where you're just like, oh, snooze one more time, or I don't want to get up and get this done today. So this is a good thing to wake up before 6 o'clock. And I would suggest that we set these times for ourselves regardless of what day of the week it is. So just because it's Saturday night doesn't mean that you should break these schedules. You should keep them all the time, because the more your body gets on a cycle and the more it gets balanced, you want to keep it that way. You don't want to keep throwing it off and having to keep always trying to come back into balance, because you're working against any progress you're making. So in my life, I have a consistent bedtime. I go upstairs at 8:30. And I bring the dog up, and I'm not gonna lie, I do watch a little bit of TV before bed, but I actually don't have a problem falling asleep. So for me, this conversation for people here is just about getting the best quality of sleep and maybe helping you if you do have a hard time. For me, I can actually just, as soon as I put my head down, whether it's just on the couch, as soon as it's sideways, I fall asleep. So even when I go up to bed, I'm generally asleep within 10 minutes. But that being said, I am following this internal clock, and I'm always sleeping before 10 o'clock. Even on the weekends when I try to stay up for a UFC event or anything else, I can't even do it anymore. I used to a lot when I was younger, because I worked in a bar. So I was up until 4 a.m, going to after hour clubs, always, especially on the weekend, just burning myself out, because I would stay up really late, but then I still had this internal clock that was getting me up in the morning. So I wasn't never getting 8 hours of sleep. And then you're so exhausted during the week, and then we live these over busy lives. So even when you would have had the time to go to bed and catch up sleep, I was always just running from one event to the other. And then later in life, that turned into single mom and young kids and working full time and daycare and all the events. So, sleep can be an issue over time. And I've really learned how to respect my sleep. And before I even go on further in the doshas there and the time of it throughout the day, I'm just going to make a note one more time here, because I know we reviewed it in another podcast. I remember speaking of it, but the only time that your brain, there's a system called the glymphatic system, and it's like the lymph system of your brain. And the only time that ever detoxes or cleanses itself is at nighttime. So this is when you really need to be asleep, because that squeezing of your brain is almost like wringing out the toxins. The same way when we do yoga in our body, and when we do a twist or we do an inversion, we're wringing out the organs and we're getting new lymph and new blood, and we're circulating it all around, because unlike our heart, which pumps, and so it moves the blood around our body and the oxygen, the lymph system doesn't have a pump. So it requires us to be able to move it ourselves. And for the brain, that happens during sleep. And actually, I think that that's going to work well into going into the next time frame, because the next time frame after that, so you hit from 6 o'clock to 10. Now, actually, we wouldn't be able to go forward. We'll have to back up there, because the one that precedes kapha is actually vata. So this one is the one that we talked about, that it's like airy and it's space and ether and it's really moving. And so this one you're going to have in the morning time when you wake up there. I'm sorry, actually, that's not even going to fit, because it's really pitta. That's the one that's doing the detoxing of the brain. So we'll circle back to that. Let's move forward then. So actually, we're going with kapha in the morning, and that's going to be from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock. And that one is when we want to wake up. Now, I know people believe that we need to eat a big meal first thing in the morning, but that's actually really not accurate, because when you're in kapha, that's when you're going to have the slowest digestion, because the whole system is slower. Everything is heavier there. So the fire juices are the least amount. So that time in the morning for most people, like if you do, anyone that does intermittent fasting, which we'll talk about as a benefit for MS, this would be the time where I would suggest actually you just skip this first meal altogether, because the longer you can go, even if it's only 8 hours, 12 hours, ideally 16 or 18 gives you the most benefit, that you're not eating anything, then this is a good time right now, because the kind of cycle your body is in really matches well with the idea of not eating. So then we go from kapha, and then now we're going to hit 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock, and this is pitta. So the pitta energy is the one that is the fiery one. So this is the one that's going to be really productive and wants to get things done and check off on the to-do list. And this one is fire, right? Fire and water. This is when you want to take your meal. So your biggest meal of the day is going to be between this time, ideally, if you want to have the best digestion. Now, I know a lot of people with MS, I suffer for it too, is my digestive system, the nerves that run to it have been damaged from relapses. My vagal nerve tone is not good. And that means that the transit time and motility is very slow in my bowels. So if digestion is a problem, because I know it is for a lot of people with MS, this would be beneficial for you to think about too, is not only chewing your food longer and being conscious of what you're putting in your body, but also when are you eating it. So that matters too. Now, I have a hard time with this, and I know some of you will too, just like TV at bed. We don't have to be perfect. Whatever we can do still benefits us. I have a hard time with this because I have a family. So they're looking for me to make the big meal for dinner time. And that's usually the time where I have the most time to put into cooking dinner, and I want to sit down with everybody and we practice our gratitude then and our hopefuls and all of these things. And it's our time together as a family. I really don't want to give up that big meal with everybody. It's also the time that they're all eating well, because my son in high school and my partner out at work, they are eating takeout. It's terrible. And my daughter, she homeschools, so I know she's here during the day, but she'll just do something like a bagel and cream cheese. And that's not really the meal I want her to be eating. So I want them all to have the dinner I'm going to be cooking. And there's something else about that too, like the community and the breaking bread together and sitting down and having intentional meals is beneficial in its own way. So sometimes I think that we don't have to follow all these things steadfast. We do what works for us. And we also think about that, the benefits and the pros and the cons of each thing and how it works in our life, because if you can make it work for you, you're going to sustain it longer. And that'll give you the benefits you're looking for, as opposed to doing things that are so against the grain, like going on a diet, that you're going to reach a block and you're going to resist it, and eventually you're going to fail at it and then drop it altogether. I'd rather you pick up little things out of this that you actually think are actionable. You can go home, you can implement it and stick with it, and let's get at least move the needle a little bit. So that's when we're going to eat our meal. And then next we're going to hit the vata, which is the air and the fire. And at this time of the day, this would be, so from 2 o'clock till 6 o'clock, this is the time where people are going to be the most creative. So for anybody that's starting new projects, a new business, they're going to do a renovation, or they're thinking of changing something in their life, it's a good time to sit down and focus on this, and maybe set some quiet time to do that so that you don't get overstimulated by the process. And then we're going to hit right back into the next cycle. So we're back in kapha again now, and that's taking us from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock. So this is a time, again, I know this is when most of us are eating, that we probably don't want to be having our big meal, because again, we're digesting slow, but this is where we want to go back to hit the bedtime. So because we are going to be trying to sleep before 10 o'clock, when we fall asleep at kapha, this is a perfect time because our body naturally wants to shut down. So not only are we following the circadian rhythm of the daily cycle of the sun, but we're following the internal, I think I want to call it chrono, I can't think of the word for it, chronocellular. So I'm sorry that I can't remember the word for it. I'll post it in the notes below when I look it up after this. But it is the fact that each cell in our body is also on this rhythm as well. So we want to go to bed at this time, and it's best to start it a little bit before you're going to get there so that you're already peaceful and you're ready to kind of shut down by 10 o'clock. And then now we're back at the vata again, which is the air and the ether. And we want to have that one. This is getting back to the lymphatics. We want to have that one during the best part of our sleep, which is going to be from 10 till 2. And I'd heard this long ago that an hour of sleep before midnight was worth 2 after. And I wonder if maybe they got just a little bit wrong in the times, but it was because of this very ancient idea. Because this is when your body is very active, and it is, instead of digesting now, this is when it would be doing detoxing. So it's going to detox, and it's going to do that the best if you're sleeping. So you really want to get good sleep at this point. I'm sorry, it is pitta at this point. I keep getting the words wrong, and I apologize for that. But this is the cycle of pitta now, which is the one we're talking about with the digestion and the energy and getting going. It's the vata in the morning, the one that's going to be taking you now from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And this is the time that people like to meditate. So I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and to be honest, that would not have been my choice to go like 4:30 to 8:30. I would have actually naturally, I always really like 6 to 10 naturally before I even knew any of these things. But because my partner wakes up then and the puppy's now on his schedule, I just felt like, well, I'll just match with everybody. It just makes life easier. So I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and once he leaves to go to work, and the dog usually wants to go back to bed at this time, this is my favorite time, always has been my favorite time to meditate and do yoga, because maybe it's just because the house is also quiet and I'm just got like time to myself, but it's also the easiest time to have insights and to kind of have a spiritual moment with yourself is found between this time, because again, that vata energy is moving through you at that point, and it creates this space. And the space and the air to me always really speaks of the consciousness. So I think of these three things could be very much like, body, mind, and spirit, right? Like kapha being more of the body, it's more heavy, it's made of material density. And then pitta is going to be more like your mind, it's productive, it's like thinking, it's goal oriented. And then you have the vata at the end, which is kind of like the spirit and the soul. It is the higher consciousness that is active right at that time when I do guess it depends where you live in the world, but it's still quiet. That the sun hasn't quite come up yet. But we have the dawn of a new day is on the horizon. So that's really great. I think that those are things you should keep in mind when you're trying to think about when you should sleep and how much sleep you should get. It should be 8 hours, and it should be between 10 o'clock and 6 o'clock the next day. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to talk about is something that I know for some people will sound a little bit out there, but I promise you that this is true. And I was just looking it up in preparation for this, and there are like a lot of studies now that are actually proving this too. And I'm really glad to find out that science is finally raising money and awareness of these things so that they're actually getting some attention and study now. But this is VASTU, and this is life buildings. So it's another kind of part of the Vedas and yoga, and they were studying this. Now, in the Vedas, to give some context to that, it's like as far back as they can record it, they think 5,000 years, but probably before that, because before they were writing it down, it was all orally translated from sage to disciple. But I mean, as far as even the Sanskrit, the scrolls and the things and the texts they have, it's like leaps and bounds above everything else. So there's something, and I quote this wrong, I'm sorry, but it's something like 30 million Sanskrit papers that have been written, both in these kinds of life sciences and building science and yoga and all of these things and meditation, but also just in like general literature and poetry and just in the arts too. And when you compared that to everything that came after, like even things that were written in Latin and Greek things, it's like it was like something like tripling everything else that's ever been written. So, I mean, that's really substantial to think about the body of knowledge that was spent on these things and how they survived this long, because truth really doesn't need to be defended. It really lasts. It stands the test of time. So for something to have made it with us this far and for this long, really to me says is that we should be listening to it and taking it serious and seeing what kind of value it could add. So this was something that I first came across maybe 2 years ago. And when I was thinking about it, I thought about my son, who always has a hard time falling asleep, hard time staying asleep. He's always tired, very much like his father was like that too. And when I heard it, I thought, oh, I need to go home and make sure I tell him, and we go and have to switch the furniture. But then, I take in a lot of information. I read a lot of things. I kind of forgot about it by the time I was back at home, and I just put it away. And I came across it not that long ago again. And I thought, you know what, this time I'm acting on it. I'm going to go upstairs immediately, talk to him about it. And, he's like my partner. He's like receptive politely to me about my ideas, even if he thinks that sometimes they're a little out there. So I didn't even really think that he was going to take my advice on this. But he did. And what amazed me is the next morning he woke up, and I forgot that I'd even mentioned it and thought that he wouldn't actually do it. He woke up and he was so happy and smiling, and he wakes up early to walk to school too. So it's 6 a.m. and he's a teenager, so that's early for them. He was so happy. And then he said, I had such a good sleep. I think it's because of what you told me. And I was so surprised. So I'm going to tell it to you guys too. And I hope that you guys will, I'm going to do more research into this as well, but I'll give you just some of the basics as I know them. And I'll try not to make so many slips with my words as I did trying to describe the doshas there. I apologize for that. It was a long morning already today. Okay, so in this life building science, what they're talking about here is about the magnetic poles of the earth and how we set up our house. And particularly in this case, I'm going to talk about sleep and how that affects it. So anyone that's ever worked a compass before knows that the magnetic north, right? So that's where the magnetic field points to. And so when we sleep in our bed, maybe explain that. Any of you that have seen the picture of a torrent, right? So we are like spirit coming down into the center. It hits the ground. It bounces back up, circular all around us and back down. And when we're balanced, that flow of energy is always going through the central channels. And whether you see that as the chakra system or whether that is like Chinese medicine, where they're looking at the meridians, the nadis, right, in yoga, it's the same idea that this energy is flowing through us, and we really are magnetic, electromagnetic beings. So this is not woo-hoo. This is real science. That is actually true. And we also have a magnetic pole. So we are also north facing, which would be our heads, because always on everything we point north as up. So our head is where we're receiving our magnetism. And we have when you think about the Earth's magnetic field, you have two forces, right? You have the solar radiation coming, which is the same thing as thinking about the energy coming into the top of your head. But then you also have the geomagnetic force of the Earth, which is coming back up the other way. And this is what creates like the magnetic field on the Earth of the Schumann frequency. I won't get into the physics too much of that today, because really we're just talking about sleep positions. But needless to say, where our head faces, our magnetic north to the actual magnetic north matters. So if we sleep with our head to the north, what happens is as the magnetism comes down, anyone that's ever held two magnets together, you know that likes repel each other. So if you put two positive ones together, they push back against each other and they try to separate, where opposites will get stuck, right? So if we're putting our head up to the north, and that's the top of our magnetic field, that's like the two of the same things repelling each other. So we're never, as we're sleeping, which is this perfect time to passively receive healing. Because during the daytime, our body does still know how to heal itself, and we still could be doing amazing things. But let's be honest, we live very complicated lives, very far removed from nature. Our thinking monkey mind is always putting us ruminating about things in the past, fearful about things that still might to come, or disrupted in the present moment because we're not somewhere that we're putting a judgment or something on. So we're not really healing at that moment for the most part, unless we're consciously meditating or doing pranayama, breath work, or doing a job maybe we love, which isn't the case for most of us, that we have a lot of time in the day for this. So sleeping is the perfect time for you to be able to recuperate and regenerate. This is the time for all of us that have a deficit now, and we're behind the game because our brain maybe has atrophied over the years. We have scars and plaques in our brain now, and we're working hard to restore that, and your body can restore and it can heal, but you have to first of all give it the things it needs, like food and water and clean air, but you have to give it sleep. Sleep is like right up there. That's really important, and it's the easiest one to do because you don't have to actually do really anything. You just go to bed. So anyway, we are never going to sleep. Try never to sleep with your head to the north. So my son, the way his room is set up, and he's very particular about how he has it because he's a gamer and he's got all computer on one side, TV mounted on the wall. So he really doesn't want me to go in there and start moving the furniture around. So I had just suggested to just sleep the other way. Like just flip where you had your feet and your head, and then don't even move the bed. Don't change anything. Just change where your pillows are. And that is what he did. And it absolutely worked. And so all the other nights since he's done it, none of them were like as, I don't think, like jaw dropping as that first night for him. But I think that's because he's acclimatizing to his new normal. Because even though he hasn't come bounding down the stairs going, oh, I feel so much better, he also has gotten up to the alarm. I've never had to go up there and get him. I've never had to like pressure him. He hasn't been late for school one time. So some of those other things, they might not be so obvious to him, but as an outsider watching him, I can see that those things are improved for him. So once I was only concerned about him because he was the one that I was thinking had sleep issues. For me, even though I have MS and I know it's important to heal at night, like I said before, I don't have a problem sleeping, and neither does my partner or my daughter. We're all really good sleepers. But I thought, it's important for us to probably be looking into this. So I did more research and thought, well, how are we sleeping? And it's only, especially in my bedroom, the way there's so many windows and closets and doors on it, you couldn't really put my bed in another position. Now, my bed, the head of it faces west, southwest. So they actually say that west is neutral. So if you face completely to the west, it's kind of neutral. It doesn't really do much of anything. The best way you're going to sleep is south, and that's because you're opposite of north, right? So now your magnetic north is facing south, which means your feet, where you're taking in the magnetism, you have an opposite pole, is now facing north. So as that north energy is coming down, it's hitting the bottom of your feet, and it's energizing you all night long. And that's why facing south is so great. So the next best thing after south, though, is going to be facing east for creativity and energy. So they say that this is a good position for people who have like high-powered jobs, or they need to get like motivated or into doing things. That's like the position you should sleep in. Now, for some of us, like in my house, we actually don't really have, like my house isn't set on a true grid. So we actually face a bit on a diagonal. So none of us technically, unless we're angling, the bed in the room, which would be weird, we're never going to have true things. So the next worst thing you can do, if that's your case where you can't, your house is on diagonal, is try not to sleep northeast head facing. Because that is not as bad as direct north, but it still will be draining for you. And then in the opposite of that being the second best thing, which is southwest, which is what my bedroom is facing. So I actually think for that one, I'm doing pretty good. So look into that anyway. There's actually a lot of other things you can do just for the energy of your house. And maybe we'll come back to that as well. Although I know there's some things that they suggest you can do to clear like stagnant energy in your house, but it gets kind of complicated with your house because, it's not like you can just change your walls or change where your bathroom or some of these things. These might have been things that it would be beneficial if the people in our cities knew about this and they built everything like this. I know that there's some buildings, and I'm not a big fan of Amazon or Microsoft for many reasons, but they actually built their buildings, a lot of their offices, based on these principles. So they obviously know something, because it makes people more productive. And even on that note, too, one other thing I was reading about it, they put kids facing north. So now you're not sleeping. So your head is not facing towards it, but your body was facing towards it. And when they had kids study and write tests, if they were facing north, they got like 20% or something better on it. And they actually say for meditating too, you should face northeast or north. Again, so almost the opposite of sleeping. And I guess it's because you're trying to have a different kind of effect on your body. One is like, bringing in energy to you, or maybe it's the direction of your body. To be honest, I'm not quite sure on that one because, like I said, it's not really my area of expertise. I just find it fascinating though. And I'm going to dive deeper into it because I think that these again are simple, easy fixes. And I've seen firsthand already how it can work. And while I was just thinking about the position of my bed, I did think about one more thing that might be worth mentioning. And I know that this will be hard for people, especially in my house, that the gentleman who I bought the house from, I think he must have done something with electronics because I never seen anyone make a garage with so many drawers and labeled so precisely. And the amount of receptacles in my house is ridiculous. And I guess that's a good problem because, with the amount of tech that most people have, they're probably like wishing they had more receptacles. But I swear I have like 2 on every wall in my house. So I couldn't position my bed in a place where there isn't receptacles or light switches. But if you have a bed that, I know I'm giving you a lot of asks here. Do you have a bed that faces a certain direction and doesn't have a plug on it? But if you do have one, it's actually better to move your bed away from those walls because, again, I won't dive too deep into it today, but the EMF from that and the dirty electricity that runs in our houses, and I have done this experiment because I have an EMF reader and I have seen the ambient readings in different places in my wall, but in my rooms, but definitely the reading from 6 feet, 3 feet, and 3 inches and touching your wall is very different. Like the reading as you get so close to it always goes into the beep, beep, beep. It's warning you, don't be close to it. You're in an unhealthy range. And we think about we're putting our pillows up against that in our head all night long. So never mind just your cell phone that you're attached to and you might sleep in the bed with or right at your nightstand table. All these receptacles are also doing something to your sleep quality. Maybe also, I'm going to give you more and more things to be scared of. And that's not the point of it. I'm not trying to make anybody scared or to become obsessive about if you can't do all of these things, because doing that is actually counterproductive. So when we're trying to clear chemicals out of our lives and we're trying to clear people and change things in our life, we do it in a gentle and loving way, because we don't need to go too fast, too much all at one time and get overwhelmed. And then, like we talked about before, then you just give up because it was too hard for you and it's too many things. And also being scared and nervous is not conducive to healing. We really want to stay calm and centered. But if you have a smart meter on your house, try not to make that the wall where anybody in your house is sleeping on. Because again, the readings that come off of that are just off the chart. Those things shouldn't even be allowed. They shouldn't be in our homes. They're definitely not safe for human habitation. But it's pretty difficult to avoid it in the world we live in now. If you live anywhere in an urban area, I mean, the 5G towers and the cell phone towers. And I personally have a house that's right on a hydro right away. So although the cables aren't above ground anymore, they're all underground. Those fiber optic cables, they say it's safer, but I have to wonder if part of my health problems has been moving into this house where you're so close to all of this electromagnetic energy, because it really disrupts the frequency of our body, and we are electromagnetic beings. So these things really do impact us, and it really changes us, not just in the bigger things like our sleep quality, but right down to the cellular level. Our cells don't know what to do with that information bathing us all the time, because our cells are supposed to be working to communicate within themselves, within the other tissues near it, like the organelle, and then the organs, and then the systems in our body, and with the people around us, and our house systems, and we go up and up and up from the micro to the macro. But if we're constantly living in a disruptive field that's giving information that's not correct to us, And again, this all can come right back into what we're watching at night. It's not just the blue light of it, it's what information are we putting in there. Same like our body with the food we're eating and then the chemicals that we're being exposed to. Like, what packages of information is going into our body? Does it really match with what is natural? And is it good for us? And does it communicate in a way that is understandable, digestible, and helpful for our body? And I would say for the most part, no. Which is why I encourage you guys to go back to the basics, because a lot of these things, like again, of everything I suggested today, really only wearing an eye mask at night might cost you something, but I mean, it can't be that expensive. And to be honest, if you can't afford it, I'm sure you could get a silk tie or some kind of like a scarf or a shawl and put it over your eyes, and it would work the same way. And the bed thing, I know that could be a bit more complicated depending on the layout of your house and your rooms. But like I said about flipping your pillow, I mean, there are probably things you can still do, and just try it out for a little bit and see if it makes any difference for you. Because I do think that if you can improve this time in your life where you're best able to heal yourself, which is sleep time, that really is now where proper rest and digest kicks in, and the parasympathetic nervous system brings us into sleep, and our brain waves hopefully become somewhat coherent at this point, and everything kind of quiets down and our body can heal itself. So any way that we can support that to happen, we should, because it's a building block for everything else that will come. So I hope that was still interesting today. I know we're talking about sleep again for a second week, but there's so many things we can cover under this topic. We'll move on to something next week. We'll maybe come back to this one again because there's a few other things I feel like might be worthwhile reviewing, but I don't want to make it too long for everybody. And I think that was a lot of things to cover today. So go out and look at the doshas maybe, and again, review it. I'll just review it again just because I know I messed up the way I said it a few times there, right? You're starting with kapha, right? The slower energy, which is going to be between 6 and 10, right? That's when we want to not be eating breakfast in the morning. We want to, at the PM, be going to sleep. And then next, we're followed by pitta. So between 10 and 2 in the afternoon, we're going to have our heavy meal then. We're digesting, we're being productive, we're getting things done. At nighttime, same thing, between 10 and 2, we want to be sleeping because that's detoxifying, that's wringing the brain out, lymphatic system. We want to definitely be asleep through that entire period. And then we end up in vata, which is the air and the ether. And that is going to take us between 2 and 6 o'clock. That's when we want to wake up in the morning, because that's when we're very spiritual. That's when we're very intuitive. We want to meditate then. We want to be up. We want to have a moment of silence to collect ourselves. And in the afternoon, we want to use that time for creative pursuits. We want to do that when we're trying to, work on our life's purpose, or things that are going to fill us, or things that will bring us joy, because that's our creative energy. So follow those cycles throughout your day, as particularly in speaking about sleep. And also think about what position you're sleeping in. And then some basic ones too, maybe about just where your plugs are, about where your smart meters are in the house, and about maybe trying to just disengage a little bit at night before you're going to bed. Blue lights, blue glasses, if you are going to watch TV, and think consciously about what are you going to watch before what are you going to put in your subconscious, and the last things you're going to be thinking about before you're going to go to sleep. Preferably don't even watch any of those things. Just, have a relaxing activity to do instead. Journaling, have a bath, have a tea, maybe not a tea if you have a bladder issue with MS, because that'll keep you up. And then black out so that you can really get restorative sleep. But that we can keep a light on still too for safety issues. So let me know in the comments below if you're going to try any of these things, and if you do, how any of them work out for you. I'm really excited to see if any of these things will work like it did with my son, because what a free, simple, easy way to just get things moving again in the right direction. So with that, I'm going to sign off for today. I want to just encourage you guys all to keep on your journey of healing. Even when it's hard, you can do it. We will build a community here together where hopefully you can find support and some really great ideas. So have a blessed day, have a blessed week, and a blessed life. Namaste.